So this will be chapter 13 of Dark Horse. Phone drilled his. Sorry. The phone drilled Eddie's sleep at 8 o'clock. He came awake on the second ring and knocked over a glass of water while reaching across the bedside table. Kate murmured in protest as she rolled on her side. Morning, Eddie. It was Pete Stackpole. It's that time. Okay, okay. Eddie slowly shed the hood of sleep. How do you feel? Eddie yawned and stretched. Pretty good. He glanced at Kate, then around the room. Sunlight filtered through the drawn curtains. His mind gradually narrowed into focus. Pete, you guys were right about the speech. Let me see. How about 15 minutes from now? I'll get Kate and our Danny in and we'll start work over coffee. Sure. You sound more like your old self. Yeah, I'm ready to get in and slug. That's the boy. Eddie, I hate to hit you with this, but I've got bad news. Your friend, George Dawson, he was killed last night. George? How? Shot by a white cop in Merton about 11 o'clock their time. Now, there's a riot underway, all hell to pay. Two blacks and one white dead so far. The state police are in, and they may have to bring in the guard. Looks real bad. What about George? Eddie struggled to accommodate the thought of death. How did it happen? We're not sure. First reports sound like he was shot by mistake. Something about a party and a robbery. George was on his way back to his car, I think. That must be mine. I let him borrow my old Impala while I was away. I'll know more in a few minutes. I've got a call into the mayor, and Phil's trying to reach somebody in Governor McCabe's office. See you in about 15 minutes. Sorry, Eddie. Eddie looked around for Kate, but she was already in the shower. Later, as they dressed hurriedly, Eddie relayed Stackpole's news. George is a guy who ducks trouble, he said. I don't think he ever carried a gun in his life, the poor bastard. Remember, you met him in Detroit last week when he flew over for my walk in the Blacktown. Of course, said Kate. I liked him. He had a funny way of shooting up his eyebrows as if everything surprised him, when actually, I suppose, nothing did. Not much. George knew the score. A waiter wheeled in a table and set out orange juice cups and two large pots of coffee. Kate went to her own room to change into another outfit, returning as the rest of the staff arrived. Phil Liccardo handed Eddie a sheet of yellow paper. Vince Anderson gave it to me, he said. It's all off the AP wire. Merton, AP. This New Jersey city of 100,000 inhabitants exploded into racial violence last night after a black man, friend of presidential candidate Edward N. Quinn, was shot and mortally wounded by a white policeman. Gunfire rattled in the city, store windows were smashed, and cars overturned. At 7 a.m., at least 3 persons were known to be dead and more than a score injured seriously. Rioting continued despite declarations of emergency, ordering civilians off the streets by Mayor Anthony Bianco. State police responded to a call for help from the Merton Police Department in this early hours. The victim of the shooting, which apparently triggered the riot, was George Dawson, 49, friend and motel neighbor of candidate Quinn, who was in Oklahoma City on a western leg of his campaign. Dawson, shot in the back of the neck shortly before 11 p.m., slumped against a fender of a car owned by Quinn and died 5 hours later in the hospital. Sergeant Frank Cossack, the officer who shot Dawson, said Dawson failed to halt when ordered to do so near the scene of a robbery of a liquor store. Police said Dawson reportedly attended a drinking party in the neighborhood. The victim's mother, Mrs. Sarah Dawson, 71, angrily disputed the police version. She said her son spent the evening at her house and was on his way home to his motel room near New Brunswick. She said candidate Quinn had let his now famous 1968 Impala model Chevrolet sedan to Dawson for the duration of the campaign. Quinn mentioned Dawson at his first press conference, and subsequently Dawson was interviewed by press and television accompanied by Quinn last week on a night walk through Detroit's ghetto. Merton, scene of the last racial skirmishes between blacks in the large Italian and Polish communities, resembled a battlefield this morning as Eddie laid the teletype copy on the breakfast table. What a hard-luck guy. No sooner did George get a leg up than wham! Something shoved him back down again, this time for keeps. The mayor's office tells me there's 2 more dead, said Stackpole. They're closed off about 20 blocks in the black section. Bianco's asking for the guard. The guard's alerted, said Liccardo, but the governor's holding off to see if the local and state police can contain it. They stood around the table, nervously drinking coffee, talking swiftly, trying to assess the meaning of an event unrolling half a continent away. For all its bravado, flashy tone, and confident victory claims, an American presidential campaign is a fragile and vulnerable thing. A candidate can be damaged by heedless remarks of friends, scarred by the acts of strangers, ambushed by a deceptively docile issue, or destroyed by a far-off happening that taps buried passions in millions of voters. Any untoward development is suspect, for it may portend sudden change that rends supposedly foolproof strategy. If there had to be a riot, said Stackpole, why not in Connecticut, where it's pinholsters, baby? Are you saying Eddie ought to do something about this because it's in New Jersey? Asked Kate. Not necessarily, but it taints him. A lot of idiots will blame Eddie, guilt by association. We should put out a statement of condolence for Dawson's family, said Liccardo. Eddie was already writing it on a scrap piece of notebook paper. I wish I was back there right now, he said. In Merton. Hunk Janwinski was incredulous. You're nuts, Eddie. What would you do? You're not the boss there. I'm running for president. That gives me some muscle. I sure don't feel right flying to California. That's the wrong way this morning. We better start moving, said Stackpole. We have to leave the hotel at 9 if we're going to make the LA speech in time. Let's get the bags down in the lobby, said Eddie. Then just hold there for a while. The next 10 minutes passed in small, hurried preparations for departure. Eddie was stowing his toilet kit in his bag when the phone rang. Stackpole answered. McCabe for you, he said. Clark McCabe, governor of New Jersey and party leader, had named Eddie to the Turnpike Commission, but had not endorsed him for president. Have you heard about our problem on Beckdale Street? Asked McCabe after the hellos. No. What happened? 14 armed black men seized a 3-story apartment house, the Beckdale Arms, in the Polish section. McCabe's speech was rapid, concise. That was about dawn. They're holding 7 white tenants as hostages. The blacks are members of a revolutionary outfit called Brothers of the Night. They threaten to shoot anyone, white or black, who approaches the building without permission. If we move in or use tear gas, they'll say they'll kill the hostages. They've put out a list of 5 demands, including amnesty, of course. They'll free the hostages and leave the building if we accept the demands, which they label non-negotiable. When I asked to come into the Beckdale Arms to talk, they replied they would shoot. The reason I'm calling you is this. They say the only person in authority they'll talk to is you, because they say you were a friend of George Dawson. What I'm doing is relaying their message to you. Eddie knew the governor, but had